Israel's President Isaac Herzog has addressed a joint session of the U.S. Congress. He's only the second Israeli president to do so following his father, President Chaim Herzog, who spoke in front of lawmakers in 1987. And while today's speech was planned to mark the 75th anniversary of the foundation of Israel, the head of state used it as an opportunity to address the U.S. growing unease with developments in his country. Herzog hailed the bilateral relationship with the U.S., calling America Israel's greatest friend and partner. But he also spoke about unrest at home, acknowledging an intense and painful debate over Benjamin Netanyahu's hardline policies. The prime minister is seeking to limit the power of Israel's Supreme Court and expand Jewish settlements in the occupied West Bank. Herzog's appeals at home for compromise on the judicial overhaul have so far proven elusive. And in his speech, he sought to reassure lawmakers that Israel's democracy was alive and kicking.
We built a nation-state which has faced relentless war, terror, and delegitimization since its birth. A country fighting to defend itself from enemy and foe, yet whose citizens continue to greet each other with the word peace, shalom. A country which takes pride in its vibrant democracy, its protection of minorities, human rights and civil liberties as laid down by its parliament, the Knesset, and safeguarded by its strong Supreme Court and independent judiciary.
And we can now speak to Aaron David Miller. He's a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, focusing on U.S. foreign policy. For more than 2 decades, he served as a State Department Middle East analyst, advisor, and negotiator in Democratic and Republican administrations. Mr. Miller, welcome to the day. Standing ovations there in Congress for the Israeli president, but the prime minister had to wait until Monday to even get an invitation to the U.S. since returning to office. What's the message here?
Well, I think the medium is the message, frankly. And Herzog's visit, frankly, is more emblematic than it is a driver of events. And I think the counterpoint is rather extraordinary. This is the second time that the president of Israel has met with the president of the United States within a year. And today, yesterday and today, the vice president, Secretary of State, National Security Advisor, you saw the reception in Congress, which was quite extraordinary, prompting a resolution supporting U.S.-Israeli relationship opposed by only nine Democrats. That's one image. The other is of I guess, arguably an invitation, no time, no venue fixed, between Benjamin Netanyahu and the President of the United States, who is frankly not interested in going to war with Benjamin Netanyahu. Presidents don't like to fight with Israeli prime ministers. It's distracting, it's annoying, it can be politically damaging. But at the same time, it's clear he is not prepared to embrace him. This is not the Benjamin Netanyahu that Joe Biden has known over the previous 3 or 4 decades. This is a risk-ready, not cautious prime minister who is desperate, on trial for bribery, fraud, and breach of trust. And the polls are bad. If the elections were held tomorrow, Netanyahu could not put together a government. Therefore, he needs to keep this one together, and that means placating his right-wing extremist fundamentalist ministers.
How bothered do you think Netanyahu is by this, by Herzog going there and him hardly being invited?
You know, it's funny because some people think that Benjamin Netanyahu's skin is very hard. Others obviously believe that his ego outweighs or is the dominant issue in his character. I mean, I think, of course, he's troubled. He's troubled by a lot of things. He's got protests, military reservists threatening not to show up for duty. The Histadrut, the largest Israeli trade union, threatening the possibility of a massive strike. And again, he's got not much to show for his relationship with Joe Biden.
There's great concern in Congress and the White House about Democratic backsliding in Israel. But if Netanyahu really were to undermine the shared values so cherished by the United States, would it have an impact on Washington's support for Israel?
It's a fascinating question. You know, my acid test, frankly, of when the U.S.-Israeli relationship changes is when you have Democrats and Republicans in the Congress, both the House and the Senate, basically debating honestly and openly two issues. One, U.S. support for Israel, what makes sense and what doesn't, and Israel's troubled relationship with Palestinians. Right now, there is almost no debate on those two issues. So I think even this democratic backsliding in Israel, over time, it will take a toll unless there's a course correction. But think about it. The Republican Party has emerged as the Israel right or wrong party. And Mr. Netanyahu doesn't care much, frankly, for the American Jewish community. It's much more invested in evangelicals, conservative and right-wing Republicans. So if, in fact, the U.S.-Israel relationship is being undermined, it may take some time to get to the point where you actually see a change in behavior on the part of an administration.
We only have about a minute left, but I do want to ask your opinion on this. Joe Biden has been very critical of the proposed judicial overhaul. Is it a good idea for the U.S. to meddle beyond that, beyond verbal criticism?
You know, one of the urban legends about Israeli and American politics is that the Israelis don't meddle in our affairs, internal politics, and we don't meddle in theirs. I worked for two administrations, both Republican and Democrat, in which there was an overt effort on the part of the United States to more or less try to influence an Israeli election. And Mr. Netanyahu has intervened repeatedly on behalf of the Republicans. So I think there are limits, particularly for an ally. And in the end, it is Israelis themselves that will determine whether or not Mr. Netanyahu gets to undermine their democratic system and the independence of their judiciary. It won't be the United States with the decisive factor and influence.
And they're making their voices heard on the streets of Israel. That was Aaron David Miller, Senior Fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Thank you so much for sharing your review with us today.